My name is Vivian, and I was 22 when my entire family decided I wasn't worth waiting for at a highway rest stop. I had just graduated college with an art degree my parents never approved of. That summer road trip to Yellowstone was supposed to be our last family vacation before I started real life. Instead, it became the day I watched my family's car disappear into the distance, leaving me stranded with nothing but $7 in my pocket. Before I tell you how my own family could do something so cruel, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely. I grew up as the middle child in a family that never quite knew what to do with me. My father, George, was a successful accountant who valued practical career choices and financial stability above all else. My mother, Diana, was the perfect corporate wife and homemaker, always concerned with appearances and what the neighbors might think. My older brother, James, followed exactly in my father's footsteps, studying business and securing a job at a prestigious firm before he even graduated. My younger sister, Abigail, was the family princess, a straight-A student with plans to become a doctor. Then there was me, the artistic one, the dreamer, the constant disappointment. Nothing I did was ever good enough. My paintings that won school competitions were just nice hobbies. My scholarship to art school was met with sighs and comments about wasting potential. Every family dinner included some version of, "When are you going to pursue something practical?" That spring, I graduated with my Bachelor of Fine Arts, and while my classmates' families took celebratory photos and went to fancy dinners, mine attended out of obligation. My father clapped politely but whispered, "It's not too late to get an MBA," as he hugged me. My mother smiled tightly for photos, but asked if any of my classmates had real jobs lined up. Despite their disapproval, I was proud. I had multiple gallery showings of my work during senior year and was already talking with a small design studio about freelance opportunities. I had plans to stay in my college apartment with roommates for the summer and build my portfolio. That's when my parents announced the annual family road trip to Yellowstone National Park. I already told you I need to stay and look for jobs. I explained during our weekly family phone call. "Vivian, this is our last trip as a complete family before real life begins," my mother insisted. "James is taking time off from his firm and Abigail is postponing her hospital volunteer work. The least you could do is participate." "You don't even have a job lined up," my father added. "A week away isn't going to hurt your future." The implication was clear. Unlike my siblings, my career plans weren't serious enough to respect. I reluctantly agreed, telling myself it would be the last time I'd have to endure their disapproval before establishing my independence. We met at my parents' suburban home to pack the family SUV. James arrived in his expensive suit, making a show of putting his work phone away, though he checked it constantly. Abigail brought medical textbooks to study during downtime. I brought my sketchbook and was immediately criticized. "Drawing again," my father said. "Maybe you could use this time to read something practical. I brought you a book on financial planning for young adults." The first 2 days of the trip were increasingly tense. Every conversation somehow turned into a critique of my life choices. At a diner in South Dakota, my father questioned how I planned to pay rent without a reliable income stream. At Mount Rushmore, my mother pointed out a gift shop employee and whispered, "Is that what you plan to do with your art degree?" James constantly brought up his recent promotion, while Abigail discussed her medical school applications. Every achievement was highlighted alongside pointed glances in my direction. The night before everything changed, we stayed at a small hotel in eastern Wyoming. At dinner, my father asked everyone about their 5-year plans. James talked about his path to partner at his firm. Abigail detailed her medical specialty plans. When my turn came, I explained my hopes of building a client list for commissioned work while applying to positions at design firms. My father put down his fork. "So essentially, you have no plan, just wishful thinking." "I do have a plan," I insisted. "The creative field works differently. I need to build a portfolio and connections." "What she means," James interjected, "is that she needs Mum and Dad to keep supporting her while she finger paints." "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising. "I received 3 commissions during senior year. I sold paintings." "For what, a couple $100 each?" my father scoffed. "Do you know how much your education cost us? We could have paid for half of Abigail's medical school with what we wasted on your art degree." I felt my face burning as other diners glanced our way. My mother noticed and plastered on her social smile. "Let's not make a scene," she said quietly. "But Vivian, we are concerned about you becoming a financial burden. Perhaps you could look into graphic design jobs at banks or insurance companies. Something stable. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. I'm going back to the room. Always so dramatic, my sister muttered. That night, I lay awake in the hotel room I shared with Abigail, staring at the ceiling. I texted my college roommate Rachel, the only person who truly supported my dreams. One more day of driving tomorrow, then we reach Yellowstone. I'll survive this. I had no idea that by this time tomorrow, survival would take on a whole new meaning. The morning of our third travel day started with a tense breakfast at the hotel buffet. No one mentioned our argument from the night before, but the silence was heavy with unspoken resentment. My father outlined the day's driving plan with his usual military precision. We would drive 4 hours before lunch, then another 3 to reach West Yellowstone by evening. We'll make one rest stop midway, he announced, checking his watch. Be efficient when we stop. I don't want to lose time. We loaded into the SUV, and I deliberately sat in the far back seat to avoid conversation. James had the passenger seat as always, with Abigail behind him. I put in my earbuds and watched the Wyoming landscape roll past miles of prairie and distant mountains under an endless sky. In another context, I might have found it beautiful, might have been inspired to paint the sweeping vistas. Instead, I felt a growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. 3 hours into the drive, we pulled into a highway rest area. It was one of those desolate places in the middle of nowhere. Just a small building with restrooms, a few picnic tables, and a large parking lot. A sign indicated the next services were 57 miles ahead. 15 minutes, my father announced as he parked. We need to make good time. My mother and Abigail headed to the ladies' room together, chatting about something. My father and James walked toward the men's room on the opposite side of the building. I lingered in the car for a moment, sending a quick text to Rachel. I had kept my phone charged by plugging into the car's USB port during the drive. Rest stop in middle of nowhere, Wyoming. Kill me now. I grabbed my small crossbody purse, which contained my lip balm, a small sketchbook and wallet, and headed to the restroom. Inside, there was no sign of my mother or sister. They must have already finished and left. I used the bathroom quickly, but as I was washing my hands, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest that signaled an anxiety attack beginning. I gripped the edges of the sink, trying to steady my breathing the way my college counselor had taught me. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8, I whispered to myself. I splashed water on my face and tried to calm down. The argument from last night kept replaying in my mind, along with every dismissive comment about my future. It took me about 5 minutes to get myself under control. Not wanting to trigger my father's impatience, I hurried outside, expecting to see the family SUV where we had parked it. The parking spot was empty. I blinked momentarily, confused. Had my father moved the car, I looked around the parking lot. There were only 3 other vehicles, a semi-truck, a small sedan with an elderly couple eating sandwiches inside, and a pickup truck. Our SUV was gone. This isn't happening, I said aloud, spinning in a circle to scan the entire rest area. Maybe they had pulled around to the other side of the building. I jogged around the perimeter, my heart beginning to race again. Nothing. I returned to our parking spot, staring at the empty space as if I could will the vehicle back into existence. That's when the realization hit me like a physical blow they had left me. My own family had driven away knowing I wasn't in the car. At first I thought it might be some kind of cruel joke. Perhaps they'd circle back laughing at my panic. I stood there for 10 minutes watching the highway in both directions. No sign of our SUV. I reached for my phone, then remembered with horror that I had left it charging in the car. My purse. I frantically checked the contents wallet with my ID credit card and exactly $7 in cash. No phone. Panic rising, I approached the elderly couple in the sedan and explained my situation. The woman's eyes widened with concern. "Your family left you on purpose?" she asked clearly, struggling to comprehend such an act. "I think there must have been some misunderstanding," I said, not yet ready to admit the full truth. "Could I please use your phone to call them?" They kindly handed me a cell phone and I dialed my father's number from memory. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. I tried my mother. No answer. I called James, who also didn't pick up. As a last resort, I sent a text to my brother. "James, I'm still at the rest stop. Where are you guys?" 3 agonizing minutes later, a reply came through. "Dad says you need to learn responsibility. Find your own way home." I stared at the message in disbelief, reading it over and over as if the words might somehow change. My hands shook as I returned the phone to the concerned couple. "Are they coming back for you, dear?" the woman asked. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, tears beginning to stream down my face. I wandered away from their car, not wanting strangers to witness my breakdown. Finding a secluded corner near a picnic table, I sat down and tried to process what was happening. My family had abandoned me, deliberately. At a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. With no phone, almost no money, and no way to get home. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. From my brother's text, it was clear this was intentional, my father's way of teaching me a lesson. I don't know how long I sat there sobbing. The Wyoming sun beat down mercilessly as I tried to figure out what to do. The rest stop had no services, no attendant, not even vending machines. Just bathrooms and an information board with a map of Wyoming highways. Eventually, a woman in her 40s approached me cautiously. She had kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Are you okay?" she asked, though it was obvious I wasn't. Between sobs, I explained my situation. The woman who introduced herself as Susan looked horrified. "Your parents just left you here, on purpose." She asked the same question the elderly couple had, with the same tone of disbelief. When I nodded, she said, "Wait here," and walked quickly to a nearby pickup truck where a man was waiting. They spoke animatedly, with the man looking my way several times, his expression changing from skepticism to shock. They both walked back to me. "I'm Tom, Susan's husband," the man said. "We want to help you." I hesitated. My parents had always warned me about strangers, yet they were the ones who had abandoned me. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I don't want to be a burden," I said, automatically echoing my mother's words from the night before. "It's no burden," Susan insisted. "No one should be left like this. We're heading east. Is there somewhere we can take you?" Through my tears, I explained that I needed to get to a bus station, somewhere I could find transportation back home. Tom pulled out his phone and searched. "Nearest town with a bus service is Riverton, about 30 miles east," he said. "We can take you there." I had no choice but to trust these strangers. As we drove in their pickup truck, Susan sat with me in the back seat, offering tissues and a bottle of water. She asked gentle questions about my situation, expressing increasing dismay as I filled in more details. "I just can't imagine," she kept saying. "My husband and I would never do that to our daughters." "Your father thinks this will teach you responsibility," Tom said, shaking his head as he drove. "All it teaches is that you can't trust your family." When we reached Riverton, Tom drove straight to the bus station. It was a small building with a single ticket counter. Inside, I learned that the next bus heading toward my home state wouldn't leave until the day after tomorrow. 2 days. I whispered, my voice hoarse from crying. Susan and Tom exchanged glances. "Where will you stay?" Susan asked. I looked down at my wallet with its $7. "I don't know." Susan pulled me aside. "Take this," she said, pressing a $100 bill into my hand. "It's not much, but it will help with a motel and food until your bus leaves." I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Pay it forward someday when you see someone else in need." They helped me find the cheapest motel in town, which still cost $60 per night. Tom carried my information down in case I needed to reach them, and Susan hugged me before they left. "You're going to be okay," she said firmly. "This isn't your fault. Remember that." As their truck pulled away, I felt a confusing mixture of gratitude for their kindness and devastation at my family's cruelty. The contrast was stark and painful. The motel room was basic but clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, still struggling to process what had happened. I was alone in a strange town, with $47 remaining after paying for one night at the motel. The bus ticket would cost $75, which meant I needed to save most of my money for that. That night, I cried myself to sleep, curled up in a ball on top of the scratchy motel bedspread, still wearing the same clothes from the morning. My dreams were filled with images of our SUV driving away, getting smaller and smaller on the horizon while I screamed for them to stop. The next morning, I woke up disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was. Then the memories came flooding back and the weight of my situation settled on my chest. I was stranded in Riverton, Wyoming, abandoned by my own family with barely enough money for a bus ticket home. I checked my wallet again, $47. The bus ticket would cost $75, which meant I had to save almost all of it. I calculated that I could spend perhaps $5 on food today, $5 tomorrow, and still have enough for the ticket. After a quick shower, I headed out to find the cheapest possible food. The motel was located near the edge of town with a few fast food restaurants and a small diner nearby. I chose the diner hoping to find something filling that would last me the day. The diner was called Nancy's Place, and it had a worn, comfortable feel. I sat at the counter and studied the menu carefully, looking for the cheapest options. Finally, I ordered a cup of coffee and a single egg with toast. When the waitress brought my meager breakfast, she gave me a curious look. She was an older woman, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "That's not much for a growing girl," she said. "You passing through town." Something about her grandmotherly manner broke through my defenses. To my horror, I felt tears welling up again. I tried to blink them away, but she noticed immediately. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice softening. "What's wrong?" The whole story spilled out: the family trip, the abandonment, the strangers who helped me, my plan to catch the bus tomorrow. Nancy listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she disappeared into the kitchen without a word. A few minutes later, she returned with a full plate of eggs, bacon, hash browns, and pancakes. "On the house," she said firmly, setting it down in front of me. "And I won't take no for an answer." I tried to protest, but she waved me off. "I've been running this diner for 30 years, and I've never heard of parents doing something so cruel. You eat up now." The unexpected kindness brought fresh tears to my eyes, but I was too hungry to refuse. I ate everything on the plate, realizing I hadn't had a proper meal since lunch the day before. Nancy introduced me to the cook, a burly man named Frank, who turned out to be her husband. "This is the girl I told you about," she said, and Frank shook his head in disgust at my story. "You come back for dinner tonight," Nancy insisted, "and breakfast tomorrow. No arguments." Thanks to Nancy's generosity, I was able to save my food money. I spent the day walking around Riverton, trying to distract myself from the constant ache in my chest. The small town had a few shops, a library, and a park where I sat sketching for hours, trying to process my emotions through art. That evening, true to her word, Nancy fed me a hearty dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. She even packed a sandwich for me to take back to the motel. "For later if you get hungry," she explained. The second night in the motel was marginally better than the first. I still cried, but the kindness shown by Susan, Tom, Nancy, and Frank had given me a fragile hope. There were good people in the world, even if my own family wasn't among them. The next morning, after another free breakfast from Nancy, I checked out of the motel and headed to the bus station with exactly $78 in my wallet. I purchased my ticket for $75, leaving me with $3 for the 27-hour journey home. Nancy had packed me another bag of food, sandwiches, fruit, and cookies. "For the road," she said, hugging me goodbye. "You're going to be just fine, Vivian. You're stronger than you know." The bus was crowded and uncomfortable. I had a window seat next to a large man who took up part of my space. The journey stretched interminably, with multiple stops at small towns along the way. The physical discomfort matched my emotional state, cramped, confined, and anxious about what awaited me at home. I had plenty of time to think during those 27 hours. How could my family do this to me? What kind of parents abandon their child at a rest stop with no money and no phone? What kind of siblings go along with such a plan? The more I thought about it, the more my hurt transformed into anger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bus arrived in my hometown. It was early evening, and I walked the mile from the bus station to my parents' suburban house, my legs stiff from the long journey. When I reached our house, I wasn't surprised to find it locked. I checked the hiding spot for the spare key under the garden gnome, but it wasn't there. They had removed it. Another deliberate act to teach me responsibility. I sat down on the front steps, exhausted and defeated. Hours passed as the sun set and darkness fell. Around 9 p.m., our neighbour Mrs. Patterson noticed me sitting alone on the porch. "Vivian," she called, walking over from next door. "What are you doing sitting out here in the dark? I thought you were on vacation with your family." I said, too tired to hide the truth. "Until they abandoned me at a rest stop in Wyoming." Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open in shock. "They what?" I explained the whole situation. Mrs. Patterson, who had known me since I was a child, looked stunned. That's unbelievable," she stammered. "Come to my house right now. You can use my phone to call them, and you're not sitting out here all night." In her kitchen, I called my parents' number. After several rings, my father finally answered. "Hello. Dad, it's Vivian. I'm back in town. I'm at Mrs. Patterson's house." There was a pause. Then in a maddeningly calm voice he said, "Did you learn your lesson? We'll be home tomorrow." Before I could respond, he hung up. Mrs. Patterson, who had overheard, looked appalled. "You're staying here tonight," she said firmly. "The guest room is made up." I slept fitfully in Mrs. Patterson's guest room, dreading the confrontation that would come the next day. In the morning, she made me breakfast and offered to stay with me when my family returned, but I declined. This was something I needed to face alone. Around noon, I saw our SUV pull into the driveway. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and walked back to my house, my heart pounding. They were unpacking the car as if nothing unusual had happened. My mother was directing my father about which bags to bring in first. James and Abigail were checking their phones, having been without good reception in Yellowstone. When they saw me standing in the driveway, there was a moment of awkward silence. Then my mother said, "Oh, Vivian, you made it back. Good." That's when I exploded. Good. You abandoned me at a rest stop with no phone and $7. I had to rely on the kindness of strangers to survive. How could you do that to me? My father stepped forward, his expression stern. We did what was necessary to teach you about the real world. You needed to learn that actions have consequences. What actions? I demanded, my voice rising. What did I do that deserved being abandoned hundreds of miles from home? Your constant disrespect, my mother interjected. Your impractical life choices. Your refusal to listen to reason about your future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you left me stranded because I got an art degree instead of a business degree, because I want to pursue my own path instead of the one you chose for me. You're overreacting, James said, rolling his eyes. It wasn't that big a deal. You found your way back, didn't you? Not that big a deal. I was nearly screaming now. Do you know how terrified I was? Do you know I had to sleep in a cheap motel and would have gone hungry if not for a kind waitress who fed me for free? Do you know I spent 27 hours on a bus next to a man who took up half my seat? My parents exchanged glances, but neither looked remorseful. Sometimes the best lessons are the hardest ones, but my father said, you needed to learn independence. By abandonment, was this planned? I demanded suddenly, realizing it couldn't have been a spontaneous decision. My brother looked away, but his expression confirmed my suspicion. You planned this before the trip, I said, my voice dropping to a horrified whisper. This whole trip was a setup. We discussed it as an option, my mother admitted. If your attitude didn't improve. I turned to Abigail, who had remained silent. Did you know too? She nodded reluctantly. They told us the night before. James and I thought it was extreme, but Dad said it was for your own good. The betrayal was complete. My entire family had conspired against me, had deliberately left me stranded far from home, and felt justified in doing so. Even worse, they couldn't see how wrong their actions were. You could have talked to me, I said, my voice breaking. You could have expressed your concerns like normal parents. Instead, you abandoned me like I was worthless. Now, Vivian, my mother began, using her placating tone. Let's not be melodramatic. You're home now, safe and sound. Let's put this behind us. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same between us again. The trust was irreparably broken. The family I thought I had never existed. After the confrontation in the driveway, I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I sat on my bed, surrounded by the remnants of my childhood art posters on the walls, sketchbooks piled on the desk, the quilt my grandmother had made for me. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. I pulled out my largest backpack and began filling it methodically. Essential clothing, toiletries, my portfolio of best artwork, a few cherished books. I took only what I absolutely needed or couldn't bear to leave behind. That night dinner was a tense affair. My parents acted as if our driveway confrontation hadn't happened. They chatted about Yellowstone, the wildlife they saw after abandoning me, the nice hotel in West Yellowstone. I sat in silence, pushing food around my plate, making plans in my head. Vivian, you're being rude, my mother finally said. We're trying to have a family conversation. We stopped being a family when you left me at that rest stop, I replied quietly. My father sighed heavily. This attitude is exactly why you needed that lesson in the first place. I excused myself and returned to my room. I waited until midnight, when I was certain everyone was asleep. Then I wrote a brief note, now I'm abandoning you, permanently. I left it on my perfectly made bed. With my backpack and portfolio case, I slipped out the front door and walked to the bus station. I had exactly $127 in my bank account money from selling a painting during my senior showcase. It was enough for a ticket to Portland, a city with a thriving art scene that was far enough away from my family but still on the West Coast. The overnight bus was nearly empty. I claimed a row of seats to myself and watched the familiar streets of my hometown disappear into the darkness. There was fear in my heart, certainly, but also a strange sense of liberation. For the first time, I was making a choice completely for myself. I arrived in Portland early in the morning with less than $20 remaining after the bus ticket. The enormity of what I had done hit me as I stood on the unfamiliar street outside the bus station. I had no job, no place to stay, barely any money, and knew no one in the city. For the first 2 days, I wandered the streets during daylight hours, spending as little as possible on food, using public bathrooms and sleeping in parks or hidden doorways at night. I was homeless, but paradoxically, I felt less abandoned than I had in my parents' house after they returned from Yellowstone. On the third day, desperate and hungry, I found a community center that directed me to a shelter specifically for young adults in crisis. The shelter was called New Beginnings, and it turned out to be exactly that for me. At the intake desk, I met Jasmine, a social worker in her 30s, with bright eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She listened to my story without judgment. "Unfortunately, your situation isn't as uncommon as you might think," she said. "Family rejection happens for many reasons, but that doesn't make it any less traumatic." New Beginnings provided a bed, meals, and access to resources. Jasmine became my case manager, helping me process both the practical and emotional aspects of my situation. "What your family did was abandonment and emotional abuse," she told me during one of our sessions. "It wasn't your fault, and it wasn't a lesson you needed to learn." With Jasmine's help, I applied for emergency assistance, began therapy with a counselor at the community center, and started looking for work. After 2 weeks of searching, I found a job at a small cafe called the Painted Cup. The owner, a woman named Tina, hired me despite my lack of experience because she liked a sketch I had done on my application. "You've got an eye for detail," she said. "I need someone who pays attention." At the cafe, I met Zach and Lauren, 2 other baristas who quickly became friends. When I finally opened up about my situation, their reactions were validating. "That's messed up," Zach said bluntly. "Like seriously messed up." Lauren was equally supportive. "My parents are difficult too, but they never did anything like that." When Zach learned I was staying at the shelter, he offered his couch until I could afford my own place. "It's not much," he warned, "but it's safer than the shelter." That first night in Zach's small apartment, sleeping on his lumpy couch, was the first time I felt truly safe since being abandoned. I wept quietly after he went to bed, not from sadness, but from relief and gratitude. Working at the cafe, I began to save money. I also started sketching the customers' quick portraits that I would sometimes give away. Word spread, and people began coming specifically to be sketched by the artist barista. Some even offered to pay me for more detailed portraits. During my off hours, I explored Portland's art scene. I discovered a local art collective called Spectrum that offered community studio space for a small monthly fee. Using some of my tips from portrait sketches, I paid for a few hours of studio time each week. At Spectrum, I met other artists who encouraged my work. I began painting again, processing my trauma through art. The abandonment, the fear, the anger, all flowed through my brushes onto canvas. 2 months after arriving in Portland, I had saved enough for first and last month's rent on a tiny room in a shared apartment with Lauren and 2 other roommates. It was small, just enough space for a bed, a desk, and my art supplies, but it was mine. No one could kick me out or leave me behind. During this time, I had no contact with my family. I had a new prepaid phone with a number they didn't know. I created new social media accounts and blocked them on my old ones. As far as they knew, I had vanished. Working at the cafe, making art at Spectrum, and living with supportive roommates, I slowly rebuilt my life. For the first time, I was living completely on my own terms. The path was harder without family support, but it was truly mine. 6 months after arriving in Portland, I had my first real breakthrough. The director of a children's community centre saw my work at a Spectrum group show and commissioned me to paint murals for their playroom. It was my first significant paid art job, and it led to more commissions. Gradually, I built a reputation in the local art community. I was far from wealthy, but I was supporting myself doing what I loved. The abandonment that was meant to break me had instead forced me to find my strength. I was just finishing a commissioned painting for a local restaurant when my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from an address I recognized immediately, my brother James. After 6 months of silence, my family had found me. My hands shook as I opened the message. Vivian, I know you probably don't want to hear from any of us, but there's been a situation. Dad had a heart attack 2 weeks ago. He's stable, but the medical bills are piling up. Mum asked me to reach out to you. The family is in financial trouble. Please call when you can. James. I stared at the screen, a tornado of emotions swirling inside me. Concern for my father's health, anger at the audacity of them reaching out only when they needed something, guilt at the small part of me that felt they deserved this hardship, confusion about what I owed them, if anything. I put the phone down and tried to focus on my painting, but my hands were too unsteady. I called Lauren, who had become my closest friend. They abandoned you at a rest stop with no money and no phone, she reminded me after I read her the email. Now they want financial help. That's rich. But he had a heart attack. I said, the ingrained family loyalty still present despite everything. And that's sad, Lauren acknowledged. But it doesn't erase what they did. You barely make enough to support yourself. What do they expect you to give them? That evening, I discussed the situation with my therapy group at the community centre. The group was specifically for young adults who had experienced family rejection or abandonment. You need to establish clear boundaries, said Marcus, our group facilitator. Whatever you decide, make sure it's on your terms, not theirs. Another group member, Danny, shared her experience. When my parents reached out after cutting me off, I thought it meant they had changed. They hadn't. They just needed something from me. After much reflection, I decided to respond but maintain emotional distance. I sent a brief email. I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health issues. I'm willing to have a conversation, but I need to be clear that I have limited resources. James replied almost immediately with my mother's phone number, asking me to video call her the next day. I agreed, setting a specific time and duration for the call. The next evening, with Lauren sitting supportively nearby but off camera, I initiated the video call. My mother answered, looking noticeably older than 6 months ago. Her hair had more grey and there were new lines around her eyes. Vivian, she said, her voice carrying forced brightness. It's so good to see your face. We've been so worried. Have you, I asked, keeping my tone neutral. You didn't seem worried when you abandoned me at that rest stop. My mother's expression tightened. We've been through this. It was a lesson that needed to be taught. And look at you now, all independent. See, it worked. I felt a surge of anger but kept it contained. I'm independent despite what you did, not because of it. James mentioned Dad had a heart attack. How is he? He's recovering, she said, her tone shifting to one I recognized all too well, the martyr voice. It's been so difficult. The medical bills are overwhelming, and with the market downturn, our investments aren't performing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely meaning it. That must be stressful. It is, she agreed, seizing on my sympathy, which is why we're reaching out to family. We need to come together in times of crisis. The irony was breathtaking. What exactly are you asking for, Mom? She looked uncomfortable for a moment, then regained her composure. Well, we know your little art hobby has been going well. James found your website. Those paintings must sell for a good amount. My art isn't a hobby, it's my profession, I corrected. And I'm just starting to build my career. I make enough to support myself, but not much more. But surely you could help with something, she pressed. We need about $5,000 to cover the immediate medical bills. The amount shocked me. Mom, I don't have that kind of money. I'm paying rent, buying supplies, building a business. Her face hardened. I see. After everything we've done for you, raising you, paying for your education, this is how you repay us. Before I could respond, my father's voice came from off camera. Is that Vivian? Let me talk to her. My father appeared on screen, looking pale and thinner than I remembered. Despite everything, I felt a pang seeing him in such a weakened state. So you finally decided to acknowledge your family, he said, his voice still carrying that authoritative tone that had dominated my childhood. You reached out to me, Dad, not the other way around, I reminded him. Because we're in a difficult situation, well, he said. One that family should help with. Family, I repeated. The same family that abandoned me at a rest stop with no money and no phone. That family. You're still harping on that. He sounded genuinely annoyed. It was 6 months ago, a valuable lesson that clearly worked. Listen. I took a deep breath. Dad, I'm glad you're recovering, but I don't have $5,000 to give you. I'm just establishing myself. "You always were selfish," he said dismissively, "always thinking about your art instead of practical matters." "George," my mother cautioned, but he continued. "We gave you everything," he said, his voice rising. "We supported you through that useless art degree. We put a roof over your head, and now when we need help, you turn your back on us." It was the same old pattern, the same manipulation and guilt tactics that had controlled me for years. But something was different now. I could see it clearly for what it was. "I'm sorry, but I can't help financially," I said firmly. "I wish you a speedy recovery, Dad." I ended the call before they could respond, my heart racing, but my mind surprisingly clear. Later that evening, James called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was what I expected. "Vivian, they're really struggling. After everything they've done for you, you could at least contribute something. Family helps family." It was the "after everything they've done for you" comment that triggered a flashback to the rest stop, to watching their car disappear down the highway, to the terror and abandonment I had felt. I had a panic attack, my first in months. Lauren found me gasping for breath on the bathroom floor. She sat with me, guiding me through the breathing exercises my therapist had taught me. "You don't owe them anything," she said firmly when I could breathe normally again. "Not your money, not your time, not your emotional energy." In that moment, with my caring friend beside me and the memory of my family's continued manipulation fresh in my mind, I understood something profound. My family saw me not as a person to love, but as a resource to exploit. When I refused to be the person they wanted, they abandoned me. Now that they needed something, they expected me to forget the past and provide it. The call with my parents marked a turning point in my healing journey. After recovering from the panic attack, I sent a brief, clear email to my family. "I can't help financially. I wish you well." Then I blocked their numbers and email addresses temporarily, giving myself space to process without their intrusion. I threw myself into therapy with renewed commitment. My counselor at the community centre, Dr. Harper, helped me work through the complex emotions surrounding my family's abandonment and their subsequent demands. "What you're experiencing is a normal reaction to abnormal treatment," she explained. "The anxiety, the flashbacks, the confusion about your obligations to them, these are all responses to the trauma they inflicted." We spent sessions unpacking my childhood, recognizing patterns of emotional manipulation and conditional love that had always been present, culminating in the abandonment at the rest stop. I began to see that the incident hadn't been an isolated event, but the most extreme manifestation of their controlling behavior. "Your family abandoned you physically at that rest stop," Dr. Harper said. "But from what you've described, they had been emotionally abandoning you for years, whenever you didn't conform to their expectations." This framework helped me understand my experiences and begin to release the lingering guilt I felt about not helping them financially. I wasn't abandoning them in their time of need. I was protecting myself from people who had proven they would hurt me. Simultaneously, I channeled my emotions into my art. I began a series of paintings about my journey, starting with a stark depiction of the Wyoming rest stop where everything changed. Each subsequent painting showed a stage in my path, the bus ride arriving in Portland, the days of homelessness, finding community, and finally building a new life. The paintings were different from anything I had created before, raw, emotional, and unapologetically personal. I worked on them between commissions, often late into the night, when memories were most vivid. One evening, as I was putting finishing touches on the fourth painting in the series, Marcus from my therapy group stopped by the studio at Spectrum. He wasn't just our group facilitator. He was also the owner of a small gallery in Portland's Arts District. "These are powerful," he said, studying the paintings. "There's something universal in your specific experience. Would you consider showing them?" I hesitated. The paintings were deeply personal, like visual diary entries. Sharing them felt vulnerable in a way that my previous work hadn't. "People need to see these," Marcus continued. "Not just for the artistic merit, which is considerable, but for the story they tell about resilience." After careful consideration, I agreed. We planned a small exhibition titled "Abandoned: A Journey to Self." The weeks leading up to the show were intense. I completed 3 more paintings in the series, each marking another milestone in my emotional journey. The final piece, still in progress, would represent where I was now. The night of the opening, I stood nervously in the corner of Marcus's gallery as people moved from painting to painting. I had included brief descriptions beside each work, providing context without revealing every detail. The rest stop painting, titled "Left Behind," drew particular attention. A woman in her 50s stood before it for a long time, then approached me with tears in her eyes. "My parents did something similar," she said quietly. "Not exactly the same, but they left me at a relative's house when I was 14 and never came back. I've never seen it depicted so accurately, that moment of realization that they're not coming back." Throughout the evening, more visitors shared their own stories of abandonment, rejection, or difficult family dynamics. My personal trauma, transformed into art, had created a space for others to connect with their experiences. It was healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. To my surprise, the exhibition was a success beyond the emotional connections it fostered. Marcus sold 5 of the paintings, including Left Behind, which was purchased by a collector known for acquiring emotionally resonant works. For the first time since arriving in Portland, I had a substantial amount of money in my bank account. I used some to upgrade my art supplies and put the rest into savings, creating the financial security my parents had always insisted I would never achieve through art. During this period of professional growth and emotional healing, I thought often of Susan and Tom, the kind strangers who had helped me at the rest stop. Through social media, I managed to find them and sent a message of gratitude, updating them on my life. Susan responded warmly, "We think of you often and have wondered how you were doing. We're so proud of the strength you've shown." We arranged a video call, and seeing their faces again brought back the memory of that terrible day, but also the crucial kindness they had shown when I most needed it. I told them about my journey since then, my art, my exhibition. "We never doubted you would land on your feet," Tom said. "But we're amazed at how far you've come." I showed them my website with images of my paintings, including the Rest Stop series. Susan wiped away tears when she saw Left Behind, recognizing the place where we had met. "You've turned something painful into something beautiful," she said. That takes a special kind of courage. Their continued support, even from a distance, reinforced what I had been learning in therapy: family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's found in the people who show up when you need them most. As I approached the 1-year mark of my abandonment and subsequent independence, I felt ready to establish limited contact with my family, but on my terms. I unblocked their emails and sent a brief direct message outlining my boundaries. "I am willing to have occasional communication, but I need acknowledgement of the harm caused by the abandonment at the rest stop. I will not discuss financial support. I will end any conversation that becomes manipulative or disrespectful. These boundaries are non-negotiable." Their responses were revealing. My father replied with anger, calling me ungrateful and stubborn. My mother was more tactical, expressing how hurtful my boundaries were to them. James sent a lecture about family obligations. Only Abigail responded with a hint of understanding, admitting she had always felt what they did was wrong. Over the following months, they gradually adjusted to my boundaries, not because they truly respected them, but because they realized I would enforce them by ending communication when they crossed the line. Our interactions remained limited and somewhat tense, but I no longer felt controlled by their opinions or manipulated by their tactics. The final painting in my Abandoned series took the longest to complete. Titled Found, it depicted not just my physical journey from that Wyoming rest stop to Portland, but my emotional journey from abandoned daughter to independent artist. In the foreground was a self-portrait showing not the broken, tearful girl from the rest stop, but the strong, confident woman I had become. The background contained shadowy figures representing my biological family, diminished in size and importance, while the foreground was filled with bright representations of my chosen family, Lauren, Zach, Jasmine, Marcus, and even Susan and Tom. When the painting was complete, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The abandonment would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now was how I had responded to it with resilience, creativity, and the courage to build a new life on my own terms. Being abandoned showed me who my family really was, but more importantly, it showed me who I could become. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the strongest foundations for a new life. The family that matters isn't always the one you're born into, but the one you build with people who truly care about you. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted let you down, or found family in unexpected places? Share your experience in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience. Remember that your worth isn't determined by those who leave you behind, but by the strength you find in moving forward. Thank you for listening to my story.